The Asics Magic Speed 3 is a shoe that I've spent quite a bit of time in now, and I'm continually impressed with it. But what it makes me think of is the Nike Zoom Fly, the original Nike Zoom Fly. And that's a really good comparison. So when I say that the Asics Magic Speed 3 is the best Zoom Fly that Nike never made, what do I actually mean by that? To explain that, we need to go back to 2017 when the original Nike Vaporfly 4% launched. It launched side by side with the Zoom Fly, which at the time was this new class of shoes, at least in the super shoe era of the Tempo Trainer, meaning it was a shoe that had all of the tech, or quite a bit of the tech, from the race shoe, the super shoe, in a more durable training companion. And the original Zoom Fly was this shoe. It had basically the exact same geometry that the Vaporfly 4% had, but it didn't have Zoom X foam, obviously. This shoe actually was in Lunarlon foam, pre-React foam, and it had a carbon-infused nylon plate. Now, soon after this shoe, we got the Nike Zoomfly SP, or Special Project. This shoe had a different upper, and it had Lunarlon midsole still. It had, I believe, still the carbon-infused nylon plate, but there was a React core in this shoe, as I remember. And then soon after that, we got probably the Zoomfly most people remember. This was the Zoomfly Flyknit that had a React midsole now, had a full carbon plate. And this really was, I think, the first Zoomfly that a lot of people probably spent quite a bit of time in. Now, one of the hallmarks of the Zoomfly is that it was a much less resilient foam. It was not ZoomX foam. You didn't have the bounce of ZoomX or the 4%. You had a much less resilient, much firmer foam that honestly, I think for a lot of people felt pretty dead. But what Nike did in the Zoomfly specifically to help alleviate that was that they put that very stiff plate in there. And in this one, the Flyknit had that carbon plate, the same carbon plate as what was in the 4%. So that forced you up over your toes. And this shoe had a very extreme toe rocker and toe spring for the time. And frankly, even nowadays, this shoe would be fairly extreme. So it allowed you to run up on your toes. It allowed you to kind of roll forward because you weren't having the resiliency and the bounce of ZoomX foam. You were having React foam, which was decent cushion, but the Zoomfly really relied on the carbon plate and the toe spring to really propel you and roll you forward in a similar way to what was going on in the 4%, just a very different foam. And that brings us, fast forward to 2023, that really does bring us to the Magic Speed 3, because this shoe feels like the logical successor to the original Zoomfly. Now, the Zoomfly did evolve from Nike. The Next Percent 1 and 2 came out. Nike released a Zoomfly 3 and 4, but it lost a little bit of its direct connection to the Next Percent or to the Vaporfly because the geometry changed a little bit. But something that never changed in the Zoomfly was that extreme toe spring and propelling you forward by using the stiff plate and extreme toe spring to really roll you forward. That became a hallmark of the Zoomfly. So when we fast forward now again to 2023 and we look at this shoe, this is exactly what that's doing. But the geometry and the feel of this shoe is much more relevant back to the original Zoomfly, the one that paired with the 4%, and it works wonderfully. This really does feel like the shoe Nike should have made. This should have been what the Zoomfly became, not the Zoomfly 5 that we have now, which has no relevance to the Vaporfly or even the Alphafly anymore. This is the logical successor to the Zoomfly. Something that I mentioned in my first impressions video of the Magic Speed 3 was that the Magic Speed 3 essentially was the original Metaspeed Edge. Now, that's not necessarily true. If you look at the Metaspeed Edge, the original one, you can see that the Magic Speed 3 shares some of the geometry, meaning there's a lower stack of foam in there, but It also has, I believe, the same plate as what's in the Metaspeed Edge Plus, which has a much more extreme toe spring in it than the original Metaspeed Edge did. And that extreme toe spring is really something that Asics is leaning in heavily in all of their shoes right now. Additionally, there's another shoe that a lot of people are confusing with the Magic Speed 3 or comparing directly to the Magic Speed, and that is a shoe called the Asics S4. Now, the S4 is only available in Japan at the moment, but I have heard rumors that this shoe will be released internationally soon, which I think would be a great thing, because what this shoe actually is really fundamentally, this is sort of a mashup between the Edge Plus and the Sky Plus. It's a little bit more Edge Plus, but it's both basically. So as you can see in this shoe, in this silhouette, we have the chartreuse yellow foam, that's FF Turbo. And you can see that this shoe actually does have the Metaspeed Edge Plus plate in it. So it has that extreme dip to the forefoot and then the toe spring back up. Again, very similar to what is in the Magic Speed. But the white foam in this shoe is just flight foam. It's not FF Blast Plus, it's just flight foam. Now, this shoe is also a little bit wider, so the outsole in this shoe is a little bit wider. And the last of the shoe, meaning the upper on the shoe, is also wider. It's what's called the Asian last, which is common in Japanese shoes, meaning the forefoot in this shoe is much wider than what you'd find in the Magic Speed 3 or even the Metaspeed Edge Plus or Sky Plus, because that's typically what you'd find in a Japanese shoe. So this shoe probably, if it is released internationally, would be very popular because it is a more stable, wider platform that is a much more generous and wider upper. Exactly what I think a lot of people are asking from Asics. So again, this is not exactly the Magic Speed 3. It's not an upgraded Magic Speed 3. It's a shoe that's sort of next to the Magic Speed 3 in the Asics line, at least in Japan, possibly internationally soon. So with all of that now out of the way, let's actually talk about this shoe. So from a spec standpoint, we have about 35 mil of foam in the heel and about 27 in the forefoot, giving you a 7 mil drop. This shoe in the reference size 9 that everyone uses weighs 7.8 ounces or 220 grams. Now, when I'm saying it's about foam-wise, Asics has a weird way of measuring their shoes. I know they're trying to normalize it and standardize it to the rest of the industry, but there's a lot of different sort of specs on this shoe, ranging from 33 to about 37 mil in the heel. So it feels somewhere in there. But the thing that I will say is this shoe does feel more minimal than either of the Metaspeed shoes in the line right now. And frankly, it can kind of feel very racing flat-esque because it is a fairly lower stack for a shoe in 2023. I have about 70 miles on this shoe right now, and I've run this shoe through a lot of different workouts, from threshold up to marathon pace and everything in between, and it has performed exceptionally well. But from a durability standpoint, I have been extremely impressed with this shoe. The outsole shows almost no wear. Again, 70 miles isn't a lot, but generally after about 70 miles in a shoe that I'm doing a lot of like aggressive hard forefoot work in, I'm going to see some wear in the forefoot. I'm not seeing any of that. The upper on this shoe is outstanding. Again, this is a very race fit upper. It fits very snug, very short. This does share the same problems, the same fit problems that the Metaspeed Edge, the original Metaspeeds, did share, meaning that it's a very small fit. So if you don't like a race fit, I would size up half a size in this shoe. Now, I went true to size, and I will admit that my toes are kind of right up on the edge, but I wanted a race fit. I did try half size up from this, and I didn't like the fit as much because I found it too roomy. But this shoe is size 9 for me, what I run in every other shoe, and I like that really aggressive, very tight fit. And this upper is such a good upper. I actually think Asics has the best uppers on this shoe, the Magic Speed 3 and the Metaspeed series right now, by far, because the lockdown in this shoe and the heel lockdown in this shoe is outstanding to the point where I can get away running with a very almost too short shoe that puts my forefoot right in this pocket over the plate perfectly, because the lockdown in the shoe is so good. I'm not getting any shifting of my foot forward in this shoe at all. And I'm also not getting any sort of wear on this upper. And I've done a lot of aggressive running in this shoe. So kudos to Asics for just everything they're doing with their materials and the minimalist sort of held back design that they're doing across the board with the shoe, because the upper is very durable, the outsole is very durable, and you're not seeing any real sort of creasing or discoloration of the foam either. The FF Blast Plus foam in this shoe works really well. So that brings me to, what has it been like to run in this shoe? Well, as I said in the upfront, this very much reminds me of a Zoomfly in the best possible ways, in that there is a very extreme sort of falling off a cliff toe off in this shoe. As you can see, there is no real heel to toe rocker. There's only essentially toe rocker in this shoe. Now, when I'm talking about toe rocker, I'm talking about this curve on the outsole that's going up. You can see it very directly. And when I talk about toe spring, I'm talking about the curve that you can see on the top of the midsole where your toes sit. There's a curve up there as well. So it's preloading your toes up, giving this shoe overall a very aggressive forefoot feel. Again, if you're a heel striker, you're not going to get a lot out of the shoe, but once you get into the mid to forefoot of this shoe, it really propels you forward. And this is where I think the stiffer Asics plate, and I've said this in other videos, I think Asics uses very stiff carbon plates. That stiff carbon plate paired with FF Blast Plus foam, which is a, let's be real, soft, almost squishy foam, works really well. Where FF Turbo in the edge, I think, is just too extreme, too harsh with this plate configuration. In the Magic Speed, I think it's perfect because the FF Blast Plus smooths that all out, and what you're essentially running on is this very stiff, very extreme toe spring, toe rockered plate, which again really propels you forward. It works really well, and it may be one of the most natural shoes to run in to really help you work on getting up on your toes and really toeing forward really well. It's completely outstanding how well it does with that. So I hope you can get a sense over this video how much I love this shoe. This shoe has been a breath of fresh air. In the era of running shoes that we're in right now, where manufacturers are telling you that you need a plated trainer to run in every day, super trainers are the thing that they're all pushing, this shoe is not that. I know people have called this a super trainer, but it's really not. This is as traditional of a tempo trainer as you can get that will pair very well with whatever super shoe you are racing in, to the point where this may be my favorite Asics shoe. I definitely prefer it over the Metaspeed Sky Plus. I'm not going to race in either one of these shoes, so as a training companion to a super shoe that I'm going to race in, which is probably going to be the Vaporfly 3, I'll talk more about this in the next episode of my marathon training series, which will come out in the next few weeks. But as a training companion to the super shoe I'm actually going to race in, this shoe's been brilliant. Compare this to the Super Blast, which I think is also an outstanding shoe. I have nothing but good to say about that shoe, but the one criticism I may be having of that shoe now is that there's too much foam in it. This shoe definitely has less foam. There's more minimalism going on in this shoe, and this is a much more restrained, held back shoe from, a lot of the other shoes Asics is putting out. And to me, again, that's a breath of fresh air, to the point where this may be the shoe of the year for me. It's definitely in the running, and I will talk more about that in the next few months as we come to an end with 2023. Those are my full thoughts on the Asics Magic Speed 3. Again, outstanding shoe. I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for a training companion to whatever super shoe it is that you're planning on racing in. Let me know in the comments what you think about this shoe. Are you running it? Do you love it? Do you have problems with it? Always let me know in the comments, because I love the dialogue that we have down there. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you find this content useful, consider subscribing, because you'll see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.